Yes. I like to sing along. This is Let's Talk Call-In Radio. Radical radio. Really radical? Well, we're getting to the root causes of important issues of the day. We try to do that anyway. This on-the-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Can we do that?
No.
Yes, come on now.
I didn't say it. Steven said it.
Please join today's conversation. Yes, join today's conversation. The numbers here are 415-663-8492 or 8317. And you can actually tweet us as well at Let's Talk on KWMR. The tweet box is all lit up and ready to go.
I'm working on it, though, in terms of judgment. I know that is a very bad habit I have.
No, I think that's fine. Why can't you judge things? What's wrong with that?
Well, because we want to hear everyone's point of view. We can discuss their point of view with them. That's the whole point of the show, is not our points of view here in the studio in our little bubble. It's to hear the collective wisdom of the populace.
This is a postmodern nightmare. Okay, Steven, this is your topic.
This is mine. What's the topic? I forgot what it was.
Compromise.
Oh, yeah.
Compromise.
Compromise.
We'll end the show here. Compromise is sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing, and we'll be back next week.
That's it. I don't have anything else to say.
Well, 663-8492. I did talk to a woman in the community who said she would call in today, and so I'm going to hold her to that. I will not name names, but hopefully have a caller on this. Well, I'll give you an example of a compromise just historically, how and it takes on this really complex character. So, famously, the Prime Minister of England, Neville Chamberlain, goes to Munich, and he makes a deal which he refers to as peace in our time with Adolf Hitler. That didn't work out, and it's considered one of the notorious examples in history of compromise where you shouldn't have compromise. Now, I'll give you a counterexample. When the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, a lot of people, members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, led by Curtis LeMay, lovely fellow in American history, were saying this...
Carpet bomb, the inventor of the carpet bombing.
He said this is another Munich. He's saying you shouldn't compromise. We should attack Cuba.
Well, there you go.
If we'd believed in compromise in Curtis LeMay's instance, none of us may be here today. So, you know, it really is pretty ambiguous. I mean, I guess we'd have to talk more about
the whole
let's
point
talk
of it,
about Neville
it?
Chamberlain, though. I think one of the keys to compromise is the power to choose. Did he really have a choice in that matter?
I don't know enough about the history to say. I mean, I think that he was certainly representing he was wildly popular even after the compromise and escalation continued. He still had huge popular support in the United Kingdom because the country was exhausted from the First World War. Because, I mean, amongst the elite in England, Hitler was hugely popular. I mean, also think about that.
And arming.
And you know, so the voices for war, you can imagine. I mean, who wants to be the voice for war, right? Pretty crazy. But we live, I mean, that is kind of the central event of that still defines our lives, which is, do you want to be the people who are saying we have to have a war and can't have any compromise with these types of people? So how many times, you know, in the last 5-10 years has a leader of a Middle Eastern country, maybe a vile dictator, been labeled a new Hitler, or Vladimir Putin, a new Hitler, with whom there can be no compromise?
There can be no compromise.
I think that's really the question, and I think so. Just as Curtis LeMay was willing to start World War III based on this idea that we can't have any compromise with these evil people.
I'm thinking, though, what about these lines drawn in the sand?
Yeah, remember that?
Red lines?
Red line drawn in the sand. It's certainly, is this an opening for compromise, or is this saying, hey, there is some, you know what, that I will not eat?
I think that it's also a fundamental difference in belief about other human beings. Some people say there can be some basis for compromise in almost all situations that would be productive. And some people say, no, there are certain pathological characters with whom you could never compromise. So take in the immediate post-war period, the famous Kennan cable or telegram, right, saying basically this Stalin guy is so terrible, there can be no deal with him. And so we immediately have to, you know, think in terms of a world in which there can't be any negotiation, there can't be any ultimate settlement or peace. There has to be, you know, what becomes
always confrontation.
What becomes the Cold War.
You know, I asked a lawyer friend of mine to talk about compromise because lawyers are, I mean, that's a lot of things what they do. And he said something that I thought was interesting. He said, I think the fine line between pragmatism and hypocrisy hypocrisy. Has to be determined on a case-to-case basis, but keeping in mind that it is not every change of mind is
Hypocritical.
yes.
Not every change of mind is hypocritical. Right. Well, I mean, we can all learn things. We can all see another person's point of view. And if you're trying to settle a case for somebody, negotiation, as we were talking, is hypocrisy negotiation? Is compromise the same as negotiation? You were saying... No,
I was saying not really, because I think that when you come to bargaining, I don't know if that's compromise. I think you have to have things. I think compromise, everything is above board. So if you take a position that is contrary to what you're going to, and secretly your position, and knowing that you're going to accept less, is that compromise or is that something else?
I don't know. I mean, what's the difference between the guy saying, I want $3,000 for this 1943 Subaru, or whatever, 1990 Subaru, and you say, I'll give you $1,000, and you haggle from there. Is haggling the same as compromise? Aren't you reaching a compromise between something that may be not a line written in the sand in either case?
Well, I mean, it's an issue of how important is what's being discussed. So haggling is one thing, and you can call it compromise. But abandoning one of your principles, something that you hold, say, that's inviolable or immutable within you, and saying, well, I'm going to give up on that because it's convenient, well, that's a pretty ugly compromise. We make lots of those all the time. But I'd say there's a third...
well, this is the point. I mean, what compromises do we make all the time, and how do we justify them? How do we
I think that's
rationalize
the interesting
them?
thing.
Yeah.
Well, I think mostly, I mean, the one I'd say is people, all of our lives right now are dependent upon the constant, everyday combustion of fossil fuels. Now, we know simultaneously that this is really destructive, but what I would say is that you need to be comfortable with your own hypocrisy. So in my work, I'm trying to create a world which isn't dependent on fossil fuels like the one that we have today. Well, now, does that mean I stop driving? I mean, I hate driving, but
but that's a clear situation where you don't have power to choose.
That's right, and that leads to all these questions about democracy. And see it for Peter at Toby's. Anyway, it's a question of we have to do things collectively in order to change the basic coordinates of how our lives function. And one of the biggest ones of those is, well, how do we create a situation where we don't need all this fuel all the time? But my day-to-day life of having to drive a car or something like that, well, that remains the same. So we need to be comfortable with that kind of compromise and not say, as many people do, there's no hope. They become fatalistic. They become nihilistic. They say, well, there's just nothing that can be done, and so let's burn up the planet.
When you say comfortable, that means maintain your self-respect?
No, I would say total loss of self-respect. I would say, comfortable with hypocrisy? Yes, I would say that you can maintain your focus upon what you're trying to achieve and still have to live in a world in which those conditions are not present. I mean, and that's the most important thing. I think the catastrophe is people say, well, it just doesn't matter. So let's, are there still any cool places in Oaxaca? Really? We could go. Maybe there's still some cool places. It's that attitude which says, well, it just doesn't matter. So burn up the earth. Pro-degradation.
Pro-deg. Use it all up now.
Flush twice.
But do you want? You might consider the fossil fuel in driving, but the flying is enormous.
Oh, it's terrible.
If you consider
it's much worse.
Your participation.
And so is, if we're talking fossil fuel, so is transportation by ship of all the products that we use.
And truck.
And the U.S. military, which is the biggest polluter on the planet.
So. No. So these are really serious problems. And but I would say if you have a commitment to try and change the conditions in which we live so that we don't need all of this stuff shipped to us, so that we don't need to maintain our mood, have to take trips on planes and go on vacation.
But isn't the plane going there anyway?
You see, I mean, I guess that would be the argument, but the question is, can you change the conditions in which that's happening? And I think you can. But I would say that, your argument, which is it's all going to happen anyway,
exactly,
it's pretty dark. And I choose to avoid that kind of nihilism, I guess you'd say. I mean, but it's very persuasive. I'm not saying that you're wrong,
well, of course,
Stephen, to say, well, it's all going to hell anyway. Let's go. Get your swim trunks.
I'm not going to go into it, but in some sense, that is close to the truth.
It's a very, very...
So that's the big compromise all the West is making. We all decry pollution, but we're all
There's no escaping that participation. That's why I don't think it's a compromise, because we really don't have the power to choose.
I think that as individuals, I'd have to agree with you, but I would say collectively different things are possible. I mean, those roads came from someplace. An economy based on cars and automobiles or airplanes came from someplace. I mean, that didn't just grow up out of the ground. But that's the way we treat it. We treat it, again, as transhistorical, immutable. It's always been this way. It can never change. I think that's wrong. So, I mean, I would say you have to deal with your hypocrisy, but not make that compromise, which is really fatalistic, nihilistic, whatever.
Okay, we change all the time, though, but only through group effort.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying. Is that there are no options available right now, and as individuals, if we're super wealthy, right, we can have all the solar panels and all the electric cars and all of that stuff that we want. And incidentally, those people don't stop flying; they continue to cruise around the world because they're just they need to maintain their personalities.
You got to go to Brazil for the carbon.
Yeah, Rio plus 9,000.
So here's a little. Many pundits presume that compromise means splitting the difference between extremes, but to find the real middle, we have to distinguish between mean and median. The mean is what we usually call the average. Add up all the points along a spectrum and divide by the number of points. Modern politics, unfortunately, has become about chasing the mean, which means that if one side's outliers becomes far more extreme than the others, then over time what counts as average or centrist drifts in that direction. So, for example, the Tea Party turning the GOP even more right-wing, and the Clintons and Obama and everyone, the Democratic Party shifting to the right. Everything's moving to the right.
Yeah, that was a compromise called triangulation, which is we'll take your issue and make it our issue. It'll be conservatism with a human face. And so Clinton will do welfare reform, and Clinton will do free trade, and Obama will do conscientious bombing of the Middle East. Whereas and we'll triangulate that position. But it does create a dynamic in which you push the people who are trying to get elected in opposition to you further to the right. We'll do unconscientious bombing. We'll do, as though there was a distinction, that's supposed to be satire, but we'll do even more extreme welfare reform and more extreme free trade deals and more.
Isn't the Tea Party, though, an example of the power of refusing to compromise?
Yes, absolutely.
Well,
the polarization. What's created this polarization, and is there the ability to compromise anymore? Or everything's shifting to the right gradually because of them. There's this groundswell of activism now on the far left that wants to, far left as far as America goes.
Really.
U.S. far left, which is to bring it all back to where it used to be, please. But no, it's what power do they have, though? These are.
Well, a
lot of people, they're all snowflakes and,
Starting to sound like me. Let's see, 415-663-8492. The topic on Let's Talk today is compromise. And I would say
what compromises would you like to see politicians make? There's a question. What would you be willing for Dianne Feinstein and Jared Huffman and everyone else that represents your interests? What compromises would you want them to make? For example, Dianne Feinstein, Mother Jones today just did this article by Jane Sheehy. Oh, it was May, June. Yes, today. Calling her the lioness in winter, that Dianne Feinstein is the only chance of toppling Trump.
Oh, la la. Wow. Well, way to go, Mother Jones. And Mark Dowie, please give them a call or just go down to the office and smack them around.
For decades, the Senate's most senior member had styled herself as being the ultimate pragmatist.
Yeah, indeed.
A veteran deal-maker willing to collaborate with Republicans to get things done. As she assured me in February, ideologically she saw herself as neither right nor left, but focused merely on whether it's right or wrong.
Oh, really?
I love the word collaboration, though.
Well, so, yeah. Collaborators
in
France, for example.
Dianne Feinstein has been a super hawk from day one, but I would say what she's saying, what she's representing there is, at the end of the Cold War is a famous essay by a guy called Francis Fukuyama that says, history has ended, right? All of the debates about what system of government we ought to have, should we have a monarchy, should we have communism, should we have some form of socialism or totalitarianism, it's all failed. There's one winner, and it's basically American liberal democracy and capitalism. And so now the question is, how do we make that a little bit better, right? But there's no questioning the actual fundamental structure. So I would say Dianne her position is I'm here to manage this system, which is the only possible system. Right?
Yeah, right. Oh,
so
yeah.
I'm here to
Sure.
make it as good as I can from within the narrow confines of what's acceptable. I would say 826 Valencia is terribly guilty of this. They say you can't change schools, but what you can do is you can ameliorate the condition of the people trapped in these horrible schools. And I think it's just defeatist. It's weird. It's a weird, kind of post, I don't know what you'd say, post-Cold War, post-ideological, sometimes people call this, view, which says that the fundamental structure of the way we live is fixed. Nothing's going to change that. So the purpose of your life is to make little improvements here and there.
Little incremental changes that don't really change the fundamental system, which is the problem with actually everything we do,
What about
isn't
the
it?
example in the blurb, though, about Bernie Sanders and
yes,
Well, there's a huge
because it was
desire.
beneficial to the state of which he is the senator.
But he does have to represent the people of Vermont.
Exactly, that's his job.
Yeah.
And the F-35, in your words, it was going to happen anyway, and because nobody really fought against it. I mean, he certainly decried it, and a lot of people have said this is ridiculous. Why are we spending $1.5 trillion on this fighter that doesn't even work? How many articles have we seen about it? We even did a show about it. We did a show about
That's right. Now,
let's talk military spending.
I think
And yet it still happens. See, this is the thing that everyone is seeing this. The man in the street and the woman in the street is seeing that no matter how much you decry something, how much it's wrong, and it still happens. Here we go. We're still talking about abortion, for God's sake. I mean,
I mean, the other part of this is just again the problem with politics since the collapse of the New Left, which I won't get into. I was talking quite a bit about this outside in the studio. But it's a real problem where it became a politics of gesture, it became a politics of mood, it became a politics of direct action for direct action's sake, where there wasn't an attempt to ground people with some kind of education, some kind of history, like they used to do with teachins, et cetera, or study groups, that were so prominent in the 60s and before in radical movements. So you have an uneducated populace that wants to express their rage, and they're upset about this or upset about this, at that, and they have no history, and they have no ideas, right? That to me seems to be the problem. Or the ideas that they have reflect the fact that they aren't actually grounded in a history of how political power works in the United States and in whose interests, and what are the opportunities to change it. But we are discussing compromise. I would say people immediately compromise way too much. Like with Obamacare would be a great example. We're not going to put single-payer health care on the table. We're not going to put a public option on the table. That's too extreme. We're going to take those away before they're even debated. And then from within the acceptable, we'll talk about compromise.
Right.
But again, it's,
well,
Go ahead.
yeah, no. Well,
I'd like to bring up a different angle, though, and that is this self-compromise. We live in a community that feels they're very, we're righteous about especially the environment. And I want to know, how compromised are we in terms of a community? I mean, this is a local radio station, and please call in and tell us how much you don't like us. Our opinionated, for an hour opinion, 415-663-8492.
And when you call in, you'll hear this funny little noise as I press a button and put you in the system. So hang on till I say you're on the air and give us your name or a name. Turn off your radio. Turn down your radio because that'll just be very distracting. And please keep the language clean because
I didn't get to see. So, excuse me. So you can't either.
We live under the Taliban-like regime of the FCC, but thankfully nobody's listening. So anyway, to your point, I think
People
it is.
are listening. Believe it or not, I think they're just shy about calling in.
Yeah, it could be.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. The point I'd make about that compromise is
please don't swear. Don't say the word Steve, because now I have to fill a form out.
And only if somebody squeals. Only if somebody squeals. Look, nobody's going to squeal. We're fine. Anyway, the squealers are not in the office. The problem is that compromise which says as long as West Marin is green and verdant and I get to take my little hikes, then reality does not exist, right? The Chevron refinery doesn't exist, the poverty of the people doesn't exist, zero. And we do have a caller. It is the FCC. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please? And
Sally.
Please keep it clean, Sally.
If she can.
Well, I've bathed today. I can Yes, I can handle my words, yes. So I'm clean on all levels. Maybe
Okay.
not pure of heart, but
Well, that would be no fun at all if you were.
Jimmy Carter and I are.
Oh, you've
There you
sinned
go.
in your heart?
Yes.
I saw those magazines in your bathroom. I didn't want to say anything.
Oh, it's Jack Jones. I can't get him out of my mind.
Ah,
Back to
Compromise.
the matter at hand.
yes.
So I think we have to discern between, compromise and complacency. Those are two different things. So I think when people compromise, that can be a good thing because there's some sort of cooperative effort. And so whether it's in your personal life or in the political arena. But there's this big distinction because I think what's happening now is there's so much sort of shock over the barrage of craziness that's going on. I think people are paralyzed, and so they are, or I don't know. And I do think some people are complacent, where they just don't think that in the political arena that any of this stuff can really take these, and so then you have a problem like you had in Poland or, Europe in the 30s. Well, it can't really get any worse than it is. It's getting weird and it's getting worse, but it can't get really, it can't get really, really bad. And then it just kept getting worse and worse, as history has shown. So during the Obama years, there was no compromise. I know, Charles, you just said that there's too much compromise. So I feel like there's no compromise. There was just no playing. There was nothing. There was just a wall put up, like, no, we refuse to do this. We refuse to negotiate with this president.
Well,
What they laughingly and grotesquely and cynically called a post-racial society, which really made me angry.
Well, I agree to some extent, Si, except for I would say that this is a mistake that we make about political theater, which is you have to play the hero and you have to identify the villain and you have to get out on that stage and say what you want. What I was saying is that Barack Obama was the person who took single-payer health care out of the conversation, a public option out of the conversation, essentially leaving the stage open for the villains. And once they start walking out over you, they don't stop walking all over you, and they just do it more and more and more. So there's a kind of standing up to bullying thing that needs to happen in our political theater, which doesn't. And it doesn't in the name of reasonableness, right? Obama's going to be the reasonable guy that both people have equally valid points of view, and I will find the compromise between them. But the problem is the villains aren't, they don't want to compromise. They don't care if you think that they have an equally reasonable point of view or not. They're just going to do what they're going to do. And so, in essence, we kind of retreated from a kind of confrontation, from a kind of real negotiation and compromise that's only allowed when you say, no, this is what we want. And then once you say, no, this is what we want, then you can get into this real battle about what can you actually get. But if you quit from the beginning, right, which is what Obama did. He quit from the beginning on health care. Then, of course, you get a bad situation. Of course, you get a situation where you have a big handoff to the insurance companies in the United States. That's
I agree.
I think people on the left tend to be not like confrontation. People who are more sensitive. Maybe they want to not deal with those kind of charged situations. I accept that, but politically, it's a catastrophe.
There's an interesting email from a guy called Steven Hurwitz who said, I think so many Democrats failed to win House and Senate seats 2 years ago was because they ceased to be Democrats, for better or for worse. They tried to sound like the other guy and asked Obama not to campaign in their districts. Yeah.
True.
Oh, yes.
And they got paid for it. They paid the price.
Yeah.
But I think, again, what we call compromise in a real, healthy, living political theater is maybe a good idea. What we actually have is a political class, especially in the Democratic Party, that just want to be, and I love this term, I hear it so much these days, facilitators, mediators. They don't want to represent a position or an idea. They're just going to manage the interaction between the varying parties. And this is what Obama said about himself. I mean, he didn't make a secret out of this.
It's not the worst person to be, though, mediator.
No, but the problem is you actually have to represent an idea. And if everybody's mediating and nobody's saying what they want and saying how do we get it, then you have what you have in West Marin, which is meetings about meetings about meetings about meetings about meetings.
That's what I said earlier to Paul. You have to represent what you actually want. If you say something that you don't want, so you'll get to something that you want, and it's bargaining. I don't think that's compromise. I think something else.
Well,
But isn't that what they do, though? I mean...
I know.
No, you talk to these people and ask them to articulate the kind of world that they would like to see, and they can't do it. Ask them what they don't want, and they will start, the Banshee thing with the Trump is so evil and blah, 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 blah. But they haven't articulated, even within themselves, what their demands are, right? But, of course, they want to mediate that. And again, and direct action. We're about action. I mean, those are the rocks in which the New Left crashed 45 years ago. And it's like we haven't learned anything or don't remember anything.
Well, here's a Republican North Carolina judge who resigned in order to keep the Republicans in North Carolina's legislature from their, the way they're trying to strip power from the Democratic governor in basically a red state. He resigned, walked out, so gave up his post as a judge so that they couldn't play with the judiciary, with the number of judges in their state. By his resignation, he was able to stop that process. They want to reduce the number of federal judges in North Carolina so that they can, because it takes away power from the Democratic governor, right? So here's a guy who stuck to his principles, gave up his,
Sure. Well, what I'm saying is that
there are politicians and people elsewhere who will who have a line they won't cross. And,
just like with the opposition in the 1980s in England, right, the Labour Party, they said basically there are no more economic disagreements anymore. And the Democrats in the United States were, right there with them. Basically, the economy as it is as it must be. But we can debate levels of funding for public schools.
Right.
But contained within that agreement over the economic issues is an agenda which we would call a right-wing agenda, that it continues its progress. It doesn't matter if you have a Democrat or not who's saying I like people or a Republican saying I hate people. It's within the sort of DNA of this terrible agreement, not even a compromise, by the left of center parties like the Democratic Party. And
that's where Dianne Feinstein comes in.
That's where Dianne Feinstein comes in. Of course, she has. Whenever you say Dianne Feinstein, dogs everywhere howl.
Dogs.
Oh dear.
No, Dianne. I mean, she has
a Sally.
The line. My dog is.
Sally, did you have another word to say?
Well, I was interested in the concept of teach-ins that Charles brought up. I think that is a great idea, but how about just teaching the entire electorate to just...
Yep.
Wait.
Hello?
Why is there an echo?
Because there's another caller on the other line.
All right, well, I'll go away now, so you don't
Thank you, Sally. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Sally. Just that point of teaching the electorate, that starts by example. That starts from creating pressure at the local level. Essentially, we have to get serious. We don't want to, because it's hard. And it's destabilizing, too, because new ideas can really crack up your personality, and most of the people around are doing everything they can to just maintain their self-conception, and it's very fragile.
Okay. Thank you, Sally. Caller on the other line. I'll get to you in just a moment. Please hang on. Turn down your radio if you can, which is what Sally was hearing. It bleed through. Anyway, we will be with you in a few seconds. This is KWMR, Point Reyes Station, and underwriting is provided by Cabaline, Country Emporium and Saddlery, the first certified green business in West Marin, a purveyor for outdoor adventures since 1978. Cabaline offers natural, sustainably produced clothing, footwear, socks, hats, scarves, purses, belts, jewelry, toys, gifts, packs, and travel essentials, along with supplies for horses and pets. Open every day on Main Street in Point Reyes Station, 415 663-8303. And KWMR is supported by Osmosis Day Spa Sanctuary, offering massages, organic facials, and the Japanese cedar enzyme bath. Osmosis is located near the Sonoma coast, just up Highway 1, and features 5 acres of gardens as well as local and organic meals. The spa menu, online booking, and info about the surrounding area can be found at osmosis.com. And thank you to the Point Reyes Light. The Point Reyes Light, an independent and locally owned newspaper telling West Marin stories since 1948, featuring award-winning reporting, essays, opinions, a community events calendar, and the sheriff's calls. Office and newsroom is open Monday through Thursday in downtown Inverness. Subscriptions, classifieds, calendar, and advertising information, plus letter to the editor forms are available at ptreyeslight.com. That's PTREYES light.com, or at 415-669 1200. This is Let's Talk, and we had a caller. We hope he's still there. Hello, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please? Hello, caller. Please call back. Call back, won't you?
You know, I'd like to bring this back to the personal, though. When you talk about, we're talking about government, and that's impersonal, but here, whoa.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, but we live in a place where we don't feel that we really are compromising. We have very strong beliefs in, for example, the environment. And I throw all this food in my compost and I go, oh my God, the Syrians, man, what soup they can make out of it. And just to throw it in one other direction, is this a new sin? Do we consider that we're sinning in a secular society when we make those compromises with our beliefs?
There's a question for the caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, this is Gail.
Hey, Gail.
Hi there.
Keep it clean, please, Gail.
I'll try.
That's not my opinion, by the way. You can get as filthy as you want.
She's only she only swears when she's on the computer.
Oh, I see. I see. So, Gail, what's your opinion?
Secret. Well, there's a couple of things. It seems like the compromise has the sort of two definitions. You know, like one assumes that we don't know everything, that we are having an exchange with another person, and of course it assumes that both people find some common ground. So I mean that's in its ideal. And then the other compromise is just where we feel like we're almost compromising our own values, where there's an internal sense of asynchrony or disingenuous behavior or whatever. And I think that is, you know, the one that you think of more damaging when you think of compromise. It's kind of really building on what Steven was saying about how we live in a place that's so beautiful. We feel like we are living closer to our values, you know.
Hello, Gail?
Hello, Gail.
Gail, did we lose you? Well, maybe Gail's going to jump back on with us, but I think that's right. We become tremendously lazy because of the aesthetic beauty that surrounds us. It doesn't have anything to do with the environment. It doesn't have anything to do with wanting there to be a cleaner environment or a less clean environment.
They're not lazy people in
lazy
the
poor
city.
people in ghettos.
No. I mean, people living urban lives are also
sure, but
lazy in that
we're
way.
a part of their therapy, right? Like we have to fly to Mexico and the Far East. They drive out to get their bit of therapy, which is, you know, the nice green fields, and that's nice. And I wouldn't say that people shouldn't do things to try and to make themselves more calm or blah 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 blah. It just isn't politics. It isn't environmentalism. It's just mood. It's music for, you know, seriously distressed people living in the 21st century.
So Gail was talking about finding the common ground, which is supposedly what it's about, right? Which is compromise. You find the common ground that you have that you can negotiate on.
The difference between pragmatism and hypocrisy.
If you're both giving up something to reach common ground. Hello, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Yeah, this is Gail.
Gail again.
I don't know where my brilliant comment got cut off, though.
Yes.
It was about
we lost you.
You were thinking about it's so beautiful living out here, and how does this relate to are we really environmentalists? I think it was something like that.
not that. I was really what I was just saying is that if I'm lucky enough to be a physician and land in Marin County, that it's actually wrong not to be grateful for that and not to appreciate it. There's a balance between participating and doing my part to make the world a better place and recognizing how lucky I am to be in a place like this and not squandering that or taking it for granted.
How does that relate to compromise?
Well, again, I don't know where the conversation ended exactly from before. It made perfect sense then.
I feel the same way.
Yes, exactly. But, I think that it's because, it's very hard. It's like I feel like there's the kind of compromise that's the appropriate, healthy kind, and then there's the kind where you feel like you're compromised with your own values and where, that is the most difficult sense of compromise. And when you look at the terrible things that are going on in the world, it's easy to become wrapped up in that. But, so I think one way to handle that sense of internal compromise is to both be grateful for what you have and to also participate as much as you can towards, improving the state of the world or things that, as you see them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it.
Excellent point. Thank you, Gail.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Gail.
I think the whole thing, though, presupposes that you have self-examination. If you don't care, then it doesn't matter what happens. You have to care before you can compromise.
I think we see an extreme. Yeah, I would agree, and I'd say we see an extreme form has become unconscious in my generation of a self that is so mercurial, which is so unfixed and constantly changing to the forces around it, that there isn't anything that can be compromised within it. Right? And this comes out of, things like est and these things that say there's no inner self, there's no soul, there's no fixed thing in you, there's nothing to compromise. There's only what you desire, and the highest good in life is the pursuit of those desires. And so at that point, it's impossible for these people to be compromised. And when I talk to people of my generation, utterly mystified by that, because I'm assuming that there is some fixed belief that they actually care about something because I care about something.
Which is why I bring up the community, because I think we live in a community that really cares. I think in some sense it's an unusual place because I think the people that I know are very caring people.
I think it's true to an extent. I think it's also what we call community and what we call caring is extremely sentimental. It's extremely performative. It's just a label we put on what we're doing.
Well,
so a community beyond what? Occasional parties. I mean, that's what people call community out here. They go to parties, and parties are fun, but there's a lack of depth in the whole culture, which does mean that those questions of compromise, as you say, kind of become moot. What if you have no principles? What if you don't care about anything? What if it's just you're overwhelmed by the beauty of a place?
Yeah, if you don't care about anything, how are you compromising? How are you making a stand? Where is the line? There is no line.
There is no line.
And we have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please? And please keep your language clean.
Oh, yeah, it's Amanda. I'm not going to swear.
Good.
Oh, good. Well, you could.
I think people make compromises all the time, all day long. I mean, it's just sort of you're always in a constant state of recalibration of sorts as you make the number of decisions that you have to make throughout any given day. We make little micro compromises all the time, and I think that the people who have trouble doing that have bigger trouble with other things.
Well, yeah, sure, Amanda, but what are the things that you wouldn't compromise? I mean, you say micro-compromise is like, will I have a burrito or a taco? I'm not sure.
Or will I not eat lunch today because I have this call or this meeting or whatever?
Right, but these are kind of trivial things that to call them compromises in that sense I don't think makes much sense. So, I mean, what are the principles that you have, Amanda, that the being stressed out and having a busy day in which you encounter lots of different people and lots of different problems and you have to make decisions all the time, aren't there things that you would say, well, no, I'm not going to do that?
Well, I think that it's I was what caused me to want to call is this sort of rampant cynicism that you have, Charles, about the fact that we live in a community. And I think that community is what you make it in a lot of ways, and that it's not, you don't necessarily have to think of things as compromises as much as I just want to make this work, and I really care about these things.
Well, yeah, I do a lot of that. I would say an interesting point on that is all of the volunteer projects I've worked on in 7 years in West Marin, I have never seen a person under 40 helping out. And I do a lot of volunteer projects.
Well, there are people under 40 at KWMR, and you're a volunteer here.
Well, maybe that's true. I don't know, but I work with old fogies, so what can I say? But I'm saying I'm not cynical at all. I'd say it's cynical. I would say it's cynical to suggest that something is there when it's clearly an absence. I'd say I'm idealistic. I'm saying there are things we can build, but we first need to have a kind of serious self-conception or an assessment of our self-conception, because you can put these labels on anything: friend, love. You pick the word, and they become so malleable that they actually have no meaning.
Well, I would like to hear you on the air discuss. I'll take my listening off air to discuss the difference between the compromising and ultimatums.
Thank you, by the way.
All right. Thank you, Amanda.
Compromising and ultimatums. Ultimatum would be somebody saying that you have to do this or else.
Yeah, there is no bargaining chip. There is no compromise.
I would say that mostly when people do that, they do that knowing that anticipating that there's not going to be an agreement on it. People who issue ultimatums are really, they're saying this is not something we can agree on. This is not something we can compromise on. Essentially saying, I'm removing myself from whatever.
Well, so there was a Facebook post this morning. Sharon Drake put up. It was about people who won't compromise, basically. And somebody commented, I remember once telling an attorney I worked with the only thing I wanted was an apology. I would walk away from the situation if the other side just apologized. His answer: think of something else, because that will never, ever happen. Now that.
Well, I want to bring up Trump, who has come up with a lot of ultimatums only to collapse, and I think collapsing is part of ultimatums.
Collapsing is part of ultimatums.
Because
that's right.
If you don't succeed, you give up on it.
Well, I mean, I'm going to rearrange NAFTA, and now he's saying, "Oh, don't worry, NAFTA is going to be the way it is. I'm going to."
Well, I mean, I think in that case, people come to him and say, "No, you can't do that," and so he says, "Okay," So maybe he's the one receiving ultimatums. Is that what you're saying? He's getting ultimatums from these senior figures in our economy.
I know. I was thinking more that he's handing out all these ultimatums, which he just collapses on healthcare, on North Korea. We're all close to.
His voters, there's this long list of things that have not come true yet,
right.
And so they're compromising their values by continuing to support him. Would you say? Or?
He'll refuse to okay the budget, let the government go on without funding for the wall, and then all of a sudden, okay, we'll let it happen.
But isn't that the art of compromise?
He's not compromising. He's
giving up his position to allow the federal budget to succeed.
I can guarantee if we were having this conversation about Obama, you would say, well, Obama had to back down on that because,
Right.
right.
Otherwise, nothing would get done.
Right, he had to. The Republicans wouldn't let him do it. Actually, it's the same case.
We're talking about the line in the sand with Syria?
No, or just with the economy, right? The Republicans don't want to, and the Democrats don't want to get out of NAFTA, right? Because they're tied into this global financial and trade system that is the people that pay them. And so when Trump says something that really appeals to the populace, like these trade deals are bad for the economy or bad for you, he gets elected based on that. But then all those people enter the room and say, oh, by the way, we can't change any of those deals. That's where our money comes from.
And he goes, well, okay, as long as you give me money for my wall. And they say, no.
I'll collapse on that one.
To call, please hang up and try again. If you need help.
We answered them so quickly that they hung up. Caller, please call back 668-492. I need to get back to that cynicism question, which is it's a popular misconception that people who have criticisms are cynical. People who have criticisms are idealistic in the sense they think things can be different. Cynics, throughout the ages, attune themselves to the conditions around them. And you might call that many compromises through the day or what have you. But they're saying that what is possible. What is actually there is what is the only thing that
is what we need to do, which is the problem with the political situation in this country. I mean, there's or the capitalist system, or whatever everything that our lives are based on is the way it is, and that's how it has to be, and
right.
you can't make meaningful change.
It's essentially a hopeless doctrine that makes sense in a place of great wealth and beauty. I can tell you that same kind of hopelessness in a place of great ugliness and poverty, we look at as the sort of depth of despair. So we have a kind of photo-negative of a kind of despair here. And the problem is it's nice, right? It's sensually nice. But the reality is it is just as bleak and hopeless as people who have given up on the possibility of change, or the possibility of bettering the world in other places.
Democrats are wondering if they should tone it down on abortion to win back Catholic voters. What do you think?
Catholic voters don't care about abortion. That's crazy. The Catholic vote.
What do you think about that, listeners? Call in if you think Democrats should give up on abortion rights.
Okay, the position that was always the religious right from the 70s on that had nothing to do with Catholicism. Catholic voters and the official positions of the Catholic Church have been out of step for ages. So the majority of Catholics aren't against birth control. They aren't against abortion. But the Church may formally be against it.
But it has nothing to do with that. It's more compromising your beliefs, speaking out of two sides of your mouth.
I guess, I would say the problem is we've allowed these issues.
That's not compromise.
That's hypocrisy.
We've allowed these issues that are so divisive, and at the same time, relatively, putting emphasis on that word, trivial, to dominate the discussion. Ultimately, I don't care about things like that. I'm more interested in the forces that underline the structure of our economy and what meaningful ways we can act to change those so that people have greater control over their lives, greater meaningful choice. Now, I'm not saying
less compromises to make in their lives.
That's right.
Fewer compromises. Marine Le Pen is likely to get a lift from the far left because Mélenchon, who did not get elected into the first run, will not support the centrist guy. What's his name? Macron.
Oh, he's not going to support him.
No, he's not going to support him because just like Ms. Le Pen, he ran his campaign denouncing banks, globalization, and the European Union, which.
Well, by the way, the people
don't we all?
And the people backing the people backing Macron, by the way, also are the center right. They're the Republicans, are essentially.
Yeah,
they actually call themselves Republicans.
Neoliberals, neocons, all those.
So he'll probably win with or without the support of Mélenchon. So I would say that would be a principled.
Well, so this is saying that Mélenchon's supporters might vote for Marine Le Pen. Which
that's
interesting. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? The far right getting voters from the far left.
I don't think it's going to happen.
On principle.
This goes back
not willing to compromise their principles to vote for a centrist.
This goes back to the kind of center left in Nazi Germany that thought, first Hitler, then us, right? That after this guy, he'll be so bad, and everybody will know how bad he is. Then they'll elect us. Well, turns out Hitler had plans for them.
Well, it hasn't even today talking about we can control Trump. Don't worry.
Well, in a sense, he is being controlled, but not in a way that will keep people's portfolios and property values high in West Marin, which is their soul. When they say they have a soul and they believe in spirit and nature, what they're really talking about is their wealth. It's a way. So these people say, don't repeal NAFTA. If you repealed NAFTA, you would crash the economies of Mexico and Canada. You saw, even when he was making the claims, there was a huge collapse in the value of the peso and the Canadian dollar, or loonie, if you will. And then he comes back out 24 hours later and says, no, we're not going to change it. And those currencies rise in value again. Getting out of NAFTA, if he did that, or even attempted to do it, would cause a massive collapse in the economy as it functions now. And West Marin would be opposed to that. And so in the sense that the Democratic and Republican establishment and Wall Street can prevent things like that from happening, we are controlling Trump. The real question will become, I think, more on war, which, of course, the Democrats have forgotten about for ages. Superhawk Dianne Feinstein, doesn't seem to have any problem with any wars. Neither does Hillary Clinton.
No, exactly.
And Bernie was notably silent about it during the campaign. And the other thing will be what's going on with all these environmental issues in terms of, drilling in, the Atlantic, drilling and, maybe ultimately off the Pacific again, breaking up, selling off parks and, things
Well, yeah,
like that.
He's the president just signed an order to evaluate all national monuments that have been declared since 1996.
Yep. Yeah, and see what we can sell off. So that's a real issue in which we'll see if the existing political forces at that level, like the Democratic Party, can exert real influence on it. And he just called the Keystone Pipeline back into existence by executive order and things like that. So I hope they do. I mean, in this case, I would be actually saying, well, maybe here's a role for demonstrations, here's a role for resistance. And I got lots of friends who went out to the Dakotas and will probably go and protest these Keystone Pipeline. I hope they're successful. At the same time, that's not a game plan. That's not offense. That's just defense.
That's a good point.
But it's still important. I would just say that, on the issue of the way the economy functions, the Democrats do exert influence over Trump. The wealthy do, right?
The wealthy do, sure. The uncompromising mindset marked by a principled tenacity and mutual mistrust. See, that's wonderful. Huh? That's well put, I think. Is well suited for campaigning. The compromising mindset, characterized by principled prudence and mutual respect, is more appropriate for governing. It's not that one is legitimate and the other not. Each has its place in the democratic process. But to the extent that the uncompromising dominates the compromising mindset in the process of governing, compromises that could reduce injustice or increase welfare go unrecognized and unsupported. There you go. That was from some opinion piece. From somewhere. Yes, I don't know very well. Anyway,
663-8492. We have time for another caller.
Flexibility and, principled flexibility.
Principled flexibility. You can get that at Yoga Toes, which is down the way here. Principled flexibility, 7 days a week.
Well, that is a fundamental of positive compromise.
I think that
flexibility of the
principled
mindset.
flexibility.
Principled flexibility.
Right, and the problem with the way we talk about it
is
is
pragmatic on
that was
some
good.
level.
I just invented that.
The question becomes, whenever we have these conversations about should you or shouldn't you compromise, we always pick an impossible situation. Germany 1938. What about Germany 1928? What about Germany 1918 when the desire of the United States and already becoming more and more their clients, the British and the French, imposed this massive punitive treaty upon Germany that 20 years later creates conditions where you have another war. So the time for these kinds of compromises, I would say early and often, because if you don't, what you do is you pull the tension on that knot so terribly that it has to be cut with a sword. And so I would say, the people who appeal to examples like 1938, they're thinking about history in the wrong way. And they're thinking about compromise in the wrong way. Because, that's not a time for compromise. Anyway. 663-8492.
And join the conversation.
Yeah, please join the conversation. Tell us in 2 minutes or less what compromises you've made in your life and how they've affected your self-image. 663-8492.
You want confession time?
I'm going to say, this was a caterer programmer promised me that she would call in and has not done it.
Yeah, you are, you see.
She also said I should be a professional, and I think, Amanda, if you're still listening, that means I need to be paid.
I'd like to say that we're all flawed.
That would compromise your volunteering.
We're all flawed people.
I volunteer for parties. Right?
We're all flawed, but we're diamonds as well.
Platitude hour here.
Flawed diamonds.
That's very sweet.
Don't we? I agree with Amanda in that we all make compromises every day. Especially those of us in relationships.
Yes.
Oh dear, Sally, you're still listening.
Sally, you're there, but Sally compromises as much as I do. That's how you continue a relationship. It's not always about you.
I don't know. You should see the heel marks on him. He says it's their thing. But,
I love it.
Very Valerie Solanas. Valerie Solanas, we should discuss that. The Society for Cutting Up Men, or the Scum Manifesto, next week. Do you remember? Nobody remember Valerie Solanas?
No, I don't.
Oh, come on. Was I the only one living through the 60s and 70s? Or I was the only one who was not living through the 60s and 70s, as the case may be.
We just can't remember it, that's all.
Well, thank you so much. This has been Let's Talk. Actually, next week, 5/5, Friday at 1, and this is in the newspaper, the local Organon will be hosting Walter Ben Michaels to discuss his book, The Problem with Diversity, How We Learn to Love Equality and Hate. We learn to love diversity and identity, rather, and hate inequality. But that was not garbled at all.
No. When was that again?
Next Friday at 1.
Friday at 1. And next week on this show, I'm really tempted to do one about cyclists. in West Marin.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not going to get these angry calls from Amanda on that one either.
Thank you, everybody. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. We'll be back next week at 11. Coming up next, live, believe it or not, Attunement with Anthony Wright. So we're hightailing it out of here. Thank you, everybody, for calling in and for listening.